Hello everyone, for those of you who are listening at home or at work or even in outer space, welcome to the second episode of our podcast, the Frame by Frame podcast, your place for all things UX and UI. So I'm Cross Preston and I'm joined with my co-hosts Will Carson and Zach Orleski. And today we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic that I don't think's really come up too much, but I think it has a lot of relevance, particularly those for people who are still looking for jobs. And the main theme of this week's episode is, what are the real differences between UX and UI? What do companies really look for when they advertise for a UX designer or a UI designer? And as a UX designer in particular, how much knowledge must you have of an industry tool such as Figma, and how does one determine that? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. So, yep, here we are again. So this is the question. How much knowledge does a UX designer, or should a UX designer know in terms of Figma or Sketch? There's Adobe XD, but that's actually being retired. So we'll just stick with Figma. So what do you guys think?
I want to kind of hear what you guys think, because you're still fighting the good fight. Yeah, so
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, definitely. Well, okay, I'll go first. So I think that, well, first of all, let's have a look at exactly what a UX designer actually does, and what a UI designer does. So UX, especially particular for those who are just tuning in, maybe you've heard of the podcast, but you're not a UX designer, UI, you're not really sure what it is. Maybe you're not sure what the difference is between product designer or UX designer. But UX designer stands for user experience, and primarily a user experience designer's role is to do everything from the conceptualization to the ideas to the design thinking to making prototypes. Now, these prototypes will, of course, need to look quite pleasant and polished, but really the main task of a UX designer is to understand the potential users, to have focus groups, to do usability testing, to do user research, to do site mapping, journey mapping, user journeys, and all this stuff, because that is how you determine the experience that a user of your app, website, or product will be. So I would say, actually, if a company, whether they advertise it at the start or they've included it in their job advert or whether they mention it in interview stage, for me, a UX designer does not need to be someone who can just design everything in the same way that perhaps a UI designer would in Figma. So really very complicated animations, because otherwise, why do we have UX and UI? Why do we not just have user designers or interface designers and developers? So I actually think that there's quite a bit of confusion. Perhaps recruiters and companies, even especially startups, may not understand that there are differences, or they just want someone who can do both. So I actually would say, my opinion is that a UX designer is not a UX designer, like how a UX designer doesn't need to know programming, although it helps to understand the concepts behind it and the roles of a developer. I don't actually think that having a masterful command of Figma is actually the core of what makes a UX designer. I would say for UI designers, yes, because UI stands for user interface. But I would say for UX designers, it's more the initial development, so the brainstorming the ideas. Of course, I'm not saying that UI designers don't do that, but UX designers do more of the research as part of the job. So that's what I would say about it, really.
No, I agree. We should be doing a lot of the research. That's, I think that's the hard part about UX, though, is it's such a vast thing. There's no like, okay, I'm going to be a UX designer. I only want to interview people. That doesn't really work. Like they want, why are you interviewing people? Like, what's your purpose? If that's what you want to do, then you could go be a be a hiring manager somewhere. You don't have to be a UX designer. And even then, it would probably benefit a hiring manager to have some knowledge of UX. um,
Yeah, I agree with that.
yeah, it's such a big field. There's That's what I think makes this the most interesting topic, but it also is the most confusing part for companies when they're hiring. And I think that might be why there's so much confusion, because we have interaction designers who are UX designers. They want to do the clickable prototypes. They want to see what they can do to make something more interesting or more usable for the user, and they start focusing on design and color and animation. But then you have other people who, they go out, they interview people, they gather all that data. You have some that just analyze, like analysis, do your heuristic analysis, do your competitor analysis. Like they're collecting that data. But we're talking big teams where they have 6 designers. They just split them up. Okay, this is your job, your job, your job. When you need something, you go talk to UI. So,
Yeah,
but then you get
I
these
think. I
small.
think. Do you think that if Yeah. Do you think that if, say, for developers, if they had developer designer, right, as a title, just instead of, Python developer or React user or whatever, do you think that if they had, like UX, user experience designer, user interface designer, if they had user developer designer as a thing, do you reckon that developers would be sort of mistakenly seen as being able to do the UX and UI parts? Do you reckon if it had design in the job title for a developer, so design developer, for example? Yeah,
I mean, yeah, if you put designer on something, that automatically makes you that person. Like when a company looks at you, design is design is design. You're a designer. You're a
yeah,
coder and a designer, so our animations should look pretty freaking great. Like that's your job. You can't put
yeah.
in sloppy code, you know what I mean? Like that's the thing, is you can't put the old gradient buttons and call that a good design unless there's a reason at that point. Like they'll judge you for any little drop shadow that's misplaced, or you'll be in charge of putting that stuff in place. You'll get lazy where they won't hire a UI, then they'll hire that design developer, and they'll be like, okay, UX, talk to the developer now. Yeah, with what design? Oh, they're going to design it for you. I don't think
Yeah.
that's going to work.
Which is why I think it isn't. Well, this is the thing. It really blurs the line between all of the different roles. I mean I mean the job I applied for, and had the interview, and the interviewer mentioned that in one of their offices, they the UX designer is more focused on the usability testing, on the user research side. You still have to know, basic knowledge of Figma, for example, enough to be able to demonstrate the kind of effects that are needed. But it wasn't really the main thing, because I mean, with user research, if you're doing sketches, you do a pencil and paper, and you can also just use a pen and paper just to write down the kind of questions you want to ask people.
Yeah,
I mean, even card sorting, sorry, but even card sorting and affinity mapping, you don't need a computer for that. You just need some sticky notes and a pen.
yeah, and I think I mean, I like sketching. That's how I work. I have notebook after notebook after notebook, and my desk is always full of
Mm,
paper with notes and sketches. That's my life. And so I prefer to
yeah.
do wireframing. I love wireframing because it lets you strip down all the unnecessary, not even details, because sometimes people leave that lorem ipsum in there, and what's the point?
Yeah, there's no point in that. You may as well just use lines. I mean, this is why I always opt for pencil and pen over FigJam. Don't get me wrong, I know how to use FigJam, but if I want to write a squiggly line as a sort of placeholder and not use the lorem ipsum nonsense, especially given the fact that I'm using my mouse on my laptop, so it's kind of hard to do that. But with a pencil, like you said, the wireframing. You do a pen and pencil, you can think, okay, yeah, box with an X, this means this. Just a few lines to represent the text. You just have like logo or just a generic logo in the top right corner or something. Yeah, definitely. It's just so much easier just to grab a pencil and paper and just sketch and do low fidelity wireframes.
See, which is great, but I think there comes a point in any company where they need that bridge person, where it's like, okay, now you're talking to our designers as a UX designer, and the wireframes are great, and they probably understand it. But if you can, don't even put colors in there, but give it some kind of style. But then you'll come to
Yeah,
smaller companies where you can show them wireframes all day, and they don't know what they're looking at because they want to see what you're going to give them. Like, what is the end product here? What am I? It doesn't have to be a prototype functioning on your phone or on your desktop for them to look at. It can be screens, but those screens have to look good. Like, it's weird, some stakeholders, that's their thing. They have to see what the future is. They don't want to see your wireframes.
yeah. But then that's why we also have mid fidelity, because obviously mid fidelity is a bit more than the low fidelity. I mean, really, the only difference between mid and high fidelities is mid, you're not really using colors or graphics, but you're using more detail than the low fidelity ones.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, if you if you are a UX designer, I will say you do need to know Figma relatively well, because even a mid fidelity, you lack the details that some might need. But if they can play with it and see it, and their brain makes that
Yeah,
next connection without there needing to be content in there or detailed content. So
yeah, yeah. But then this leads on to the other part of the theme, doesn't it? How much knowledge of Figma does a UX designer need? I mean, how do you define knowledge? Is it someone who just knows how to do shapes on a phone template, or is it someone who knows how to emulate someone's scrolling, so the scrolling effect, or is it someone who actually does what would qualify as animation? Like maybe the homepage has a very slow wave, and if you look at it very carefully, you can sort of see it move. I mean, for me personally, again, I think it's good. It can only benefit a UX designer to have all this knowledge, but I think it doesn't really add more value to the fulfillment of what a UX designer does. Yeah, of course, you have to know Figma, you have to be able to prototype, but then that's what we all did in our course with Career Foundry, right?
yeah,
We
and
did
I would say it
we
really
did all
depends
that.
on your company, and it depends on your place in that team. Like, what is your specific role? Because everybody's you might have a similar role as somebody else you've been talking to, or somebody you follow, or whatever it is, and you might have a similar role. And if you're lucky, you get to work for a company that's great and they understand design, and you're in a cushy spot where you can do what you thought you were going to do when you left your boot camp. Or yeah, it's so based on particulars, and it makes it really hard. But I do notice, just from multiple job interviews, and even having even getting freelance work and stuff, it was, I don't think people know what it is. It's still, you say UX designer, most of the people I tell, hey, I'm a UX designer, they don't know what you're talking about. You're like, so, like, the screens you look at when you
Yeah,
open an app, like, that's what I design. And they're like, oh, okay. So, like, But that's the only idea they have then, and then they think graphics because that's what people do. They're like, "Oh, I
Yeah,
design the interfaces," and they're like, "Okay, cool." And it's like, well, it's not necessarily the interface design itself. I'm designing the system behind it, like the blueprint and why it functions that way.
yeah.
And
Well, I've even had people ask me that, when they say, "What do I do for a living?" I say, "Well, I'm a UX designer by trade, hopefully soon by profession." But yeah, I say I'm a UX designer, and they say, "Oh, what's that? Is that like graphics design? Oh, are you a product designer? What does UX mean?" And sometimes, occasionally, I've come across people where they actually ignore the UX, and you just say, "Yeah, I'm a UX designer," and they say, "Oh, wow, you design things, cool." I
yeah,
don't know whether when I say UX designer, whether they think I'm stuttering saying you designer. I don't know, but yeah, I've not really come across anyone who sort of knows what UX design is, either in well, when I say in the industry, I mean within the recruitment process, or even just Joe Blogs or Jane Doe. You know,
yeah, it's tough because even like companies realize they need these things, and it doesn't matter what the job title is. If it's a newer field or something that's catching on because it is vital, it becomes a catchword, and then everybody's using it. Nobody really knows what it is, but they have to have one. And then you get the
yeah,
confusion of, well,
exactly.
where is UI and UX drawn? Because every UX designer I see pop up on LinkedIn now is UX UI, UX UI, UX UI, and it's like, well, are you a
Yeah,
UX designer who specifically targets the UI side? Like you want to do interaction design and you want to do um, bits and pieces of UI here and there, or is that your thing? Because you should have been a UI designer then.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. You see it all the time, UX UI designer, and you think, well, do they want someone who does both, or are they just looking, or do they think that, yeah, they mean the same? We know, but we need two roles, although we don't sure the differences between UX and UI. So we'll just say UX UI. If we get a UX designer apply, we get a UI designer apply, then we're good. That might be it, as a possibility at least.
Yeah, because
And even
you
here,
can also tell somebody, oh, I'm not a UX designer and I'm not a UI designer. I'm an interactions designer.
yeah,
Okay,
or you
what
can
the hell
say,
is that? And then it's like, oh, well, I just designed the micro interactions between buttons, or I program how things look when they float. You click on them, and you're those are weird
yeah,
small details that,
rollovers, all that stuff.
and those don't matter till like end game. Like those are the things you're putting in for the final go before it's handed off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah, this is what you need to hand it off. You put everything in your folders, you organize the graphics, you name all of the frames and the layers and everything else. But having said that, I kind of think that if if people think about it logically, like, you go to a car showroom, okay, you don't see the engine, you don't see the mechanical components, but you can't have a car without the engine, or a chassis or an axle or anything like that. So it's like, you think about it logically, you have to have someone who does the start, someone who does the middle, and someone who does the end. So UX designer, then the UI designer, and then the developer. And I think, well, actually, just thinking about it logically, it's fairly easy to tell the differences, because you can't create a product. You can have a really good looking product, but if there's no science or methodology or research behind it, then what need is it fulfilling? I mean, the two things we go by as UI UX designers is, what is the problem or the challenge, and what's the solution? You know?
Yeah, I mean, for great example, when was that? 2015, maybe it was 2015. I had a Dodge Stratus. Leave out the beautiful part. This car was just a car. But the the worst thing was we had a super cold winter, and it kills your battery if you leave your car outside, and it's like 13 below freezing or more. There hits like there's a shelf life on your battery as soon as the wind chill hits that low, and The
Yeah.
next morning, I got up to
Uh,
start my car. My car was dead, and I was like, "Okay, well, that's easy. I don't live that far from a auto store. I'm gonna go pick up the battery I need. I'll put it in my car. It's fine." I get a ride down there,
yeah.
get a battery, get home, open up the hood of my car, and I'm like, "Okay, so the battery's under. Oh, that's the frame of the car." So I have to go in through the side of my car and take the panel off and go in through the wheel well just to put a car battery in. So
I'm still arguing with my mum on that when I get the Triumph Spitfire, especially if it's the one like a Mark II from the 60s. Because we've got a carport, one car in there, and one car will have to be on the drive. And she's saying, "Oh, but what about my car?" And I said, "Mum, your car is built to handle all these elements to stay overnight. You know, it's not cars don't rust around the rear wheel arches like they used to, but my Triumph Spitfire would. I got to keep it in there. You know, I got to keep it in the carport."
well, there was obviously no UX done on some of the vehicles. It's yes, the car is comfortable. You can sit in it. It drives. It does what it's supposed to do. But if there's any errors with the car, you're kind of screwed if you left it up to the engineer to design it, like accessing it. It makes sense. It saves space. You put it there. Great. But how do I get to it easily? Like, dude, it's freezing outside. I had to go get a battery and figure out how to put it in my driveway.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I was lucky with my cars. I never had to change the battery on it. Actually, no, I think once actually my old classic Escort from the 80s. I think once the battery went flat for some. Was it my car? Or was it my one of my dad's old ones? I don't know. But having said that, with cars though, I actually think that there was more user UX design in the older cars because. Well, no, actually, no. I would say there was more UI and UX because nowadays, if you get cars, just to make draw a parallel with this, if you get cars in each of their different classes, so for example, um, you get like an estate, a saloon, an SUV, pickup truck, etc., etc. They all look the same now because it's the key for dynamics. So they all look the same, and sometimes you have to really look to see what brand of car it is. Whereas even 30, 40 years ago, you see a car and you know, for example, oh, that's a Ford Probe. Oh, yeah, that's a Mitsubishi GTO. So actually, I think nowadays there's less creativity with the UX, with the UI design, and I think the UX design in modern cars is more. Well, everyone expects we have all these um, emissions regulations to conform to. So I think even now on modern products, I don't know if there's really that much UX compared to before when people. I think more people probably cared, in another era. Whereas now everything is also quick, everything's got to be done, everything has to be short and concise, and
and that's
I
why,
think
as a
that also
UX
doesn't.
designer, you need to know UI. Like, it's really important to know Figma because there will come times where, unless you're in a big design team, you're going to be that guy, and they come there and they're like, "So, wave your wand, do the magic."
Yeah,
And you
yeah,
look at them and go, "Wait, what?" And they're like, "Yeah, well, let's see this thing." And then you come
yeah,
up, and if you
yeah,
do come up with a nice looking idea and something that they're sold on, you might also be responsible for hitting some deadlines using Figma, like that you're gonna have to get adept quick.
yeah. That's the thing, isn't it? Even if you prove yourself, it'll be a case of you're sort of taking on the role of the UI designer or even the product designer if they've not got different departments. But I think it's really important that companies have different departments and really understand the differences. I mean, we graduated as UX designers, even on our course. We had a section on UI, but it was UI elements. Which I get. That's where I think, yeah, you need to know some stuff in Figma. The more stuff you know, the better. But again, it's not UI is not the main focus of UX, and UX is not the main focus of UI. I mean, UI is user interface. UX is user experience. So you think, okay, what's the experience of the user or the customer? Um, and my background in customer services, I've handled all kinds of different people, and it's that psychology. I
No,
never got a customer
that's
call
the
me to say, "Hey, I don't agree with the design of this. But it's just the function isn't working."
yeah. No, but that's the thing now is I think the industry is definitely changing after layoffs and how hard it was or still is. And so there's a chance like you're gonna have to do some stuff you didn't think you would have to. So just as preparation, it's like why not go back and spend an extra week going over your designs in Figma for whatever personal project, bootcamp project, doesn't matter. Just go back, go over it, and play with it. Like make a playground out of it.
Mm.
See what you can do with the UI. Play around with that. Okay, great. If you want to go into different types of research or even UX writing is huge. Like I don't know how many times I've spent most of my day just thinking out the content for our company's product, and it's like
I would really love UX writing. I mean, I like writing anyway, but UX writing as well. I think it's great.
no, and for me, it's definitely a different creative flow as well. Like you get an opportunity to be like, okay, there's a conversation happening here, and I need it to look legit. So, what would we be saying if it was via this our product? Because we're tax related, so it's very specific, and so you have to like dig and find these information out of interviews you've done and information you've gotten from users, plus any research you can do on the side, like on the industry itself. And then like, okay, here's how I build this conversation so that they can see that feature in our app. And to somebody seeing a demo, it looks like people are using this app, and it actually makes sense if you read it. And so it's,
Yeah,
yeah, UX writing is super important. And I think it got overlooked for a little while, and then people started realizing
I think it did. Yeah,
they were tired of seeing lorem ipsum on their demos,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so they were like, we
yeah,
need to get somebody for this. But
yeah. Well, UX writing,
that also brings up
it's an art
okay,
in itself.
yeah.
It's an art in itself.
So it's like really, in all honesty, should you learn more Figma as a UX designer? It can only help. That's all it can do. It can only
Yeah,
help.
yeah, it can only help, but I don't think. I think as long as you can do even basic transitions. So, emulating the scrolling effect, you can do a prototype that connects one frame to another, a function, pop outs and stuff. I would
No,
say that is actually what that
that's
is
just it.
really that's
Yeah,
really all that a UX designer should need. But in the current climate, what a UX designer should need is a lot of is different from what companies or other people think a UX designer should need.
but that's also where
So I think,
UX, like how much writing should you spend, or how much time should you spend practicing your story writing skills as a UX
yeah.
designer?
So can we conclude then? Because we're about to wrap this up actually. So can we conclude then that a UX designer doesn't need to have such an in-depth knowledge, just enough of a perfunctory knowledge to be able to do a working prototype, add some effects, UI elements, scrolling effects, etc., etc. But
I would
that,
say I would say based on your aspirations inside of UX, then you should spend more time focusing on the program that is more tailored to what you want to do in UX. So if you want to be interaction
yeah,
side, you better learn Figma. If you want to help with UI, then you really have to learn Figma. If you want to be making demos, you got to learn Figma. If
yeah,
you,
yeah, definitely. I
yeah.
mean, I
So
mean, we all did it. I mean, we all did it because it was part of a course. But even our course, though, there wasn't any section on Figma. We just had to learn and watch YouTube tutorials and just experiment.
I think I have a pretty good definition for what knowing enough is as far as UX or UI goes, especially for the beginners, people who are still in boot camp or fresh out of boot camp. And I think it's knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. And of course, we struggle with this heavily when we're still in bootcamp or still learning because we have no clue what we don't know. And if you're not from a design background, then you don't have the proper context to really place everything that you're learning from bootcamp. And so, like for example, I've spent a lot of time in Figma at this point. I've spent time just screenshotting pages from popular apps and websites and rebuilding them, or maybe finding a specific animation or interaction that I thought was cool and trying to remake it in Figma. And so I'm at the part now where I feel comfortable with what I know and I feel comfortable with what I don't know. Because at this point, I've heard of all the different things you can do in Figma. And I know that I'm one YouTube search away from knowing how to use those functions or those features or making those cool things. And so while you're still like fresh out of boot camp, I think there's a lot of confusion and maybe lack of understanding, like we've been saying this whole time, of how much do I need to know? Well, I think you need to know that if you're applying to a job at a 3D video company and maybe you have no 3D experience, you need to know, oh, I don't know this stuff, but I'm comfortable not knowing it. Because in the time between sending an application and maybe hearing back, I can go to YouTube and figure out how to do some 3D stuff in Figma. It's that sort of knowing what you don't know that you need to get comfortable with so that you can not panic when these situations arise. And of course,
I
yeah,
think that flows into the never-ending learning, like that yearning for more information. With Figma, it's an endless pit. I mean, they have variables for everything now.
absolutely. And mhm, absolutely. And again, for you people who are still in boot camp or fresh out of it, I think that you only really get over that hump of discomfort by getting your feet wet. I'm not saying getting a paying job right now because that's what we're all trying to do. I mean, getting together with a couple other brand new designers, maybe your peers from your boot camp, and just try to get a project done. It's probably not going to be great, but throughout the project, you'll realize that some things just felt wrong, some things just felt off. And then on your downtime or after the project is done, you'll be able to sit back and think like to some solutions for the things that made you feel like pieces weren't perfect. Um, or even like volunteer your time for some free design work. I know some people are against that, but I did it and my feet, well, I got some good experience out of it. And I feel like I'm way more comfortable now with what I know. And of course, with what I don't know. So now I feel way more prepared to tackle any sort of job expectations for the future.
I would agree with you there. I am a big fan of design challenges. Um, there's what is that? That's the fig challenge. Uh, I joined that, and it's more on the UI side.
Oh,
Yeah, it's her
I've
name
seen
is
this. Yeah,
um,
I was going to say it is more UI. Yeah, it
yeah,
is
and I
more UI.
actually she was just trying to learn animations in Figma, and I had already learned that and figured that part out. And I was helping her with some of the transitions and stuff. But that was like one of I follow her. I'm glad her whole program is taking off. Like it took a minute, and now it's actually going really good. But she's starting to do all sorts of like today she did a special on LinkedIn, and it was Figma auto layout and UI design, and it's specifically like here's what you need to know about auto layout to help your UI design. And her name is
Yeah, I still need to use auto layout more. The thing is, I was doing quite often because of the software I use anyway, like for other things like Photoshop and Office. I'm just so used to doing everything with precision, but manually. I mean, I know how to use auto layout. It's just one of my personal projects. I just don't really think about using it because I just go into detail and I think, okay, I just use my directional keys to make it match up with the rest of the logo icons. But then copying and pasting from one frame to another, it actually pastes it in the exact same place you want
mhm.
it to be anyway. I found.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I guess we can conclude then from that yes, a UX designer shouldn't need to know such a in-depth have such an in-depth knowledge, but given the current climate, we do recommend that if you are a UX designer, keep practicing in Figma. Don't be afraid to experiment. Animations can be tough, but there's no all that'll happen is the animation doesn't work. So keep improving your knowledge. It is key. We don't necessarily agree with how the industry's going in terms of this blur between all of the different roles. I mean, it could be that if you're a UI designer, you might have come across jobs where they say, "Oh, you in addition to designing a good interface, we also need you to be able to interact with customers." So I think we can conclude that we might not agree with it, but this blur between all of the departments of UX and UI, perhaps even in the future the developers department, maybe everything will all just be synchronized into being one role.
I,
Okay, so that was the topic for this week. Please join us again next week. We will probably be looking at a topic that Will and I are dealing with is the countless job rejections. We know that it can be a very trying process, but hopefully, with our podcast and our episode next week, we can we can show you that you don't have to let it get you down, and there's a good support in the sense of that others are going through the same thing, so you can think, well, it's not about my skills. It's not that I lack skills. It's not even us as designers. It's just the recruitment process for a lot of the times just seems to be wrong. So remember, it's not you. It's not that you're not skilled. It's just that the way the industry is for jobs now is not the best time. Anyway, so we're going to sign off. I think we deserve the rest of a restful night. So from me, see you or hear you, or you'll hear us rather on the next episode. And also from my co-hosts, Will and Zach. So if you guys want to say a farewell before we wrap this up.
yep. Have a great evening.
Yeah. Oh, before we go, actually, however, we do have now an email which you can write into us. So if you have any questions, we can spend, for each episode, we can spend a little bit of time answering your questions. And the email address is this is something I will be posting on LinkedIn. We also have a YouTube channel, and we hope to get the first few episodes uploaded. The first episode we did last week, or the week before, will be uploaded. But for those of you listening, the email is framexframe.uxpod@gmail.com. So that's framexframe.uxpod@gmail.com. And of course, as always, please feel free to get in touch with us on LinkedIn. I'm Cross Preston. We've got William Carson and Zach Orleski. Look us up on LinkedIn, connect with us, ask us anything about UX, even UI elements. And also remember that occasionally we will get guests come on the show. They could be anyone from a UX researcher to a UX writer to a developer to a user interface designer. So please keep tuning in, and we look forward to delivering another cool, if somewhat extemporaneous episode. Good night, everyone, and hear you on the next podcast.